we don't talk about tin a lot, do we? It's very much all about copper and lithium. But did you know the tin market is in deficit for the fourth consecutive year, with global tin stockpiles close to record lows? And guess what uses tin? EVs. Let's get the details from the MD of Elementos, Joe David. Joe, welcome. Why don't we talk about tin very much?
Tin's certainly got a bit of an image problem, doesn't it? I think we still think of tin as tin foil, tin cans, maybe even the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz. So unfortunately, people don't yet see it as the key ingredient in solder, and solder feeds into every electrical circuit. And obviously, as we move to electrification and green infrastructure of tomorrow, including EVs, of which you mentioned, tin's use is just forecast to go up very substantially.
Okay, so why, I mean, we started out by saying that global tin stockpiles are at record lows. Like, why?
Well, demand's going up, clearly, for the reasons we just covered off, basically the electrical future and the use of tin as a solder. But then the other critical element is supply. There has been no significant supply side added to the tin market in 20 years. China's a major supplier, and they have not been able to increase their tin output for 20 years. You then go through the other major suppliers, being Indonesia, Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, and the DRC. There's not much security of supply from any of those countries for the global manufacturing markets. But then you get down to it, there's just been so little supply added into the market, as I said, over 20 years. Okay,
so is this the case of everybody's sort of onto this, and everybody's going and digging for tin and trying to get these mines up and running? Or is it still a case that it's very much bringing old mines back to life? Like, is this going to be a oversupply meets demand story? Just give us some of the dynamics of what's happening out there.
So I guess the reason why there's been so little the underinvestment over the last 20 years is the market's always just been able to match the supply and the demand. A couple of things have materially changed. We used to have a huge strategic supply in the US. US used to have 70,000 tonnes at the turn of the millennia. That is gone. They've sold that down to about 3,000 tonnes. So that's been sold into the markets. That was one of the, I guess, flex points which helped balance the market. The second was the artisanal supplies coming out of Africa. Before we really moved to responsible supply, there was a lot of child labour and other poor practices coming out of Africa, and a lot of those countries that were supplying some of the tin, that flexible tin coming into the market. That, with all the regulations, that's really dropped off, and the market's not seeing that supply come in. So they're the two reasons there's been a material underinvestment. Now, coming back to, this isn't copper. There's not 200 juniors trying to get copper mines up and running at various stages of development. There is a handful. There's only 2 listed tin producers on any of the exchanges globally, and only 1 in Australia. And there's probably about 8 of us juniors trying to develop mines. Some of them are greenfield, new mines, and some of them are restarting of old mines. Us, as Elementos, we have a greenfield project in Spain, and we have a brownfield, the restarting of an old underground tin mine in Tasmania. So a little bit of both.
Why Spain?
Well, Spain's a fantastic place to have a mine. In terms of Europe, people are a little bit afraid of mines, but Spain is very pro-mining, especially the south of Spain in Andalusia, where we are. And the other major reason, Europe has no tin mines, has no tin supply. So as we move into a world of, critical and the geopolitics situation, and each, I guess, corner of the earth trying to get its own supply, and Europe's very, very keen at developing its own supplies of these critical minerals. There is no tin supplies. So we and our Oropesa project in Andalusia in Spain, we want to be Europe's new tin supply. And when we get our project up and running in about 2025, we will have we'll be producing about between 1% to 2% of global tin supply.
Do you have any offtake agreements? Like, I'm wondering who would be buying the tin. Does it go through a sort of supply chain before it gets to the end? Solar manufacturers or car manufacturers, whoever is going to actually put it in product at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main, you generally have tin smelters in the middle. So most of the tin smelting in the globe is centered around Southeast Asia. So Malaysia, Taiwan, Thailand, and China. They do most of the tin smelting, which again has introduced some quite significant geopolitical risks with all that smelting being done in such a small corner of the globe. Europe, and certainly with some of the off-takers we're talking to, very keen on developing its own smelting capacity. That takes it down to a tin ingot. So effectively what, like a gold ingot, tin ingot, and then that gets secondary processed by solder manufacturers into wires and those sorts of things. So again, we're working very closely. We're talking to the traders, we're talking to the smelters, and we'll assess that. We're currently working through that process. Our ultimate goal is to have all that done within the EU.
Okay, so interesting. When I think smelting, I think dirty, bad air, again, sort of going against what we're being told is sort of the raison d'etre in the European Union in terms of clean and green. It's also sort of like hard to get your head around all this clean and green technology coming from such dirty processes. What does tin smelting look like in a Western country in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I think, again, the reason why traditionally all that smelting was centered in that Southeast Asia is because they had those lower thresholds, exactly what you said. They weren't as focused on reducing the environmental releases into the atmosphere. Now, that world has changed. Back in Southeast Asia, they're not so keen on that, and the technology on the back end of these smelters has greatly improved to really filter out a lot of those bad toxic chemicals going into the atmosphere. And certainly the technologies that we're talking to potential partners with in Europe are doing exactly that. So you can scrub a lot of the bad stuff out of what goes into the atmosphere, which is fantastic. And certainly technology's come a long way from that traditional view of what smelting looks like.
Okay, interesting. So just let's touch upon the tin project in Tasmania. So this is bringing an old mine back to life. Is that significantly cheaper? Can that happen quicker? Can you start selling the product before 2025?
Yeah, hey, the short answer is no. And I guess just to put some context on it, our focus is the project in Spain. So we're certainly pushing that one ahead. Most of the timeframes, as most miners will tell you, is on the regulatory side. So basically from the moment you finish your technical studies, you basically go deep into your regulatory applications to get your mining license, your environmental approval. So unfortunately, whether you're doing a greenfield project or a brownfield project, those timeframes don't change greatly on average, talking generally, of course. So certainly we're much further down the path on our Spanish project than we are in Tasmania. Our Tasmanian project, while it is a restart of an old mine, I'd put that more as an exploration project for us, being the Cleveland project in Tassie. So as I said, major focus of us is getting the Oropesa project in Spain into operation by 2025.
So I note that when we talked to the share price for Elementos, it was up around sort of March of last year. It looks like that's when the highs were achieved. It's been languishing since. So what's the plan? What's the catalyst that could reassure investors that everything is going along as it should at Elementos?
Yeah, well, hey, if you look at us and the tin price, like most junior mining companies, we've moved very closely to what the tin price did. So in March last year, we're at record highs. Tin price on the London Metals Exchange was $50,000 a tonne. Subsequently, that dropped down to about 20, and we're back up to nearly $30,000 per tonne. So we probably haven't moved back up as much as the tin price. So certainly for investors, I think that's a little flag there. The tin producers have already moved back up close to where we were trading last year at comparable prices. So certainly we think there's some upside there. But secondly, for us, we're moving into feasibility study. So by mid this year, we'll have our feasibility study out, which sets us up perfectly to complete our approvals within Spain. But secondly, and most critically, to go talk to the banks within Europe and the off-takers, get this thing financed into construction, ready for operations.
Joe, what's your background? How did you come to tin of all things? And talk to the experience of the board as well, because a lot of, in my experience, it's execution, right, from here on in.
Yeah, no. So my background, I'm a mining engineer. I also did a commerce degree, so I've spent time both on the technical side, feasibility studies on developing mines. Secondly, on the financing side, I worked in M&A on buy-side advisory for about 5 years as well. So certainly the front end of developing mines and getting them financed is my forte. I did a lot of time in coal and iron ore infrastructure, like a lot of people that have come to Australia, but certainly, and a personal passion of mine is base metals, is technology metals, and the role they're going to play moving into the future. So I was very pleased 2 years ago to take the role with Elementos, moving into the MD role, and certainly, this technology metals focus, of which tin plays a critical role, is the reason I was so interested in getting into Elementos and getting into tin. So moving on to the rest of the board, I'm very fortunate to have my chairman's Andy Gregg. He ran, if you know Bechtel, which is one of the US's biggest construction firms, he ran the metals and mining division for about 13 years, and very successfully. He's my chairman. He's also my major shareholder, which I know a lot of investors are happy to see when the chairman's got skin in the game. He holds about 12% of the company and a major supporter. In addition to that, one of the major directors I'll point out is we've got Brett Smith on as a NED. He runs Australia's only listed tin miner in Metals X. So certainly having another tin person running a listed tin company, one of only 2 listed tin producers globally, on my board is very helpful as well. So great experience, and the background of those guys developing mining and minerals project is pretty much second to none.